Today I'd just like to share with you an introduction to the guidance that we've produced for CIRIA, retrofitting to manage surface water. It's been a joint project with the Pennine Water Group, so Richard Ashley's here today, along with urban design consultant called Susturb as well, because we recognise the absolute importance of urban design when we're looking to start to retrofit measures, and I'll come on to that in a little bit later. So just in terms of what I'd look to cover today, just wanted to kind of really flag up this is a real great opportunity for us to maybe do things a little bit different. We've always been retrofitting to manage surface water for many, many years. It's just that we've tended to do that always below ground, and we may have a wider opportunity to do things a little bit differently now. Briefly touch on why we should be retrofitting, what we can retrofit, and the benefits of retrofitting, but maybe just doing it that a bit differently. And then just a very brief kind of overview of the guidance to hopefully whet the appetites for you to go and buy it, as Paul Schaffer would be very pleased with. So, our traditional approaches to managing surface water. They have typically been in urban areas, been below ground, with pipes and, say, storage. And a key thing that Ofwat have been saying is that they believe that external drivers cannot be affordably addressed using traditional underground systems. So there's certainly a recognition that we may need to be looking for a slightly different approach here. So, what are the real opportunities there for us? Using maybe a mixture of green and grey. Because it's not all about just going all the way to the left or right, depending which way you want to look at it, going towards, say, green infrastructure or subs. But we do have to recognise that we have limitations on our resources. And so we can really look to manage surface water runoff in a very different kind of way. Because when we do that, we can maybe kind of create communities that are very pleasant and vibrant places to live, maybe far more than what they are at the moment. We can treat surface water, so improve the water quality, and actually improve the habitats. We can maybe return water to the ground, which obviously has substantial benefits where we can do that, and provide far more resilience to both the extremes in terms of flood risk and drought. Some of the other things, though, in terms of we can attenuate urban heat islands and the carbon segment, if I could even get the word out, sequester. I apologise, I'm even struggling to say that today. Thank you very much. It's just so much simpler. But we can also look to create multi-purpose measures and multi-purpose facilities, which are great when we start to want to actually live and have a more sharing community. So why would we do this? Well, this clearly one real key issue, which has often been at the forefront, maybe for many years, and certainly quite recently, is flood risk. And flooding that can actually happen repeatedly over time, despite actually putting in interventions to actually try to resolve the problem. But flooding has actually been really up there. But at times we've maybe forgotten a little bit around the water quality aspects, and certainly what may come around for us in terms of water quality with the Water Framework Directive. So that's quite a challenge for us. But there are opportunities. We are, in certain places, at risk of drought, as shown within the model village here. And it just kind of actually flags up that we can really start to move from not just what are our problems, but we can really actually look to find our opportunities. Because there's areas where, quite frankly, they could look an awful lot better, couldn't they? We could really enhance these areas that become far more pleasant places to actually live. And there's going to be ongoing opportunities through regeneration. And really tapping into some of the opportunities that exist, that we can start to make quite a big difference. So in many ways, our key challenges as we look ahead, we do have an awful lot of economic uncertainty. And there's a substantial pressure that we actually go and deliver more for less. We have European directives looming over us, and unless we're going to swerve around them. They will be challenging us. We also have growth and urban creep, and particularly the urban creep we know has substantially increased some of the flow actually entering into our drainage systems. And then we have climate change, and the challenges of maybe more extreme types of rainfall, for example. And what's very clear is trying to manage flows through development or redevelopment alone will not actually work. And we need to be looking far more from a retrofitting perspective. So, some real key opportunities. Well, one of the absolute key things is that we work together, and this has to be at a variety of scales. And I'm going to show a real nice example of where it kind of failed, to be frankly, to deliver any multiple benefits. This is in Sheffield, and this is what it looked like about a year and a bit ago, so we're not talking about far long ago. This is what it looks today. So we've actually gone from green to grey, or at least a bit more grey. And we've really missed an opportunity to do something different. And manage that water in a different way, rather than actually increase the amount of impermeable area in the public realm, as well as increasing the amount of impermeable area in the private realm. Because what you might just make out is on the left of the picture at the top, there's also a load of new concrete driveways, so people can park off the road, and we've increased more parking on the road for the swell of cars that we're expecting to actually arrive here. I think very critical, though, in terms of how we'll start to achieve this is through our engagement approaches. And the level of engagement that we will probably need to start to do far surpasses anything, certainly, that we would normally do for many traditional retrofit projects, shall we say. Particularly if we're going to look to retrofit not only within the public realm, but on the private realm. Individual properties. That's quite a big step for us. Particularly if we want to kind of look at it on quite a big scale. And will we want them to assume responsibility and maintain those on their own property? So how will we do that? How will we actually get to them and find what resonates with that individual that they want to become involved in all this? And we may need to look at financial measures and incentives. Because certainly from what we've seen, certainly from around the world, that's one aspect that has made a difference. And it's quite just nice show how some things are actually changing. So the image in the top is a church car park where they retrofitted surface to actually park on. The middle image, which may be more well known to some of you, is the Dings in Bristol, where this was retrofitting all in the streets. But actually it was 2 years they took engaging with the residents to make those changes. Or you could take the example from Australia here in Stringybark Creek, where they looked at financial incentives. So there's clearly things that we need to do and approaches that we will need to take. But what can we look to retrofit where? Well, I don't think we can ever rule out the fact that we will need to actually look at our grey infrastructure, and there will still be a need for that. But what else can we do? Well, we can look at the property level. So we could look at, for example, a very simple disconnection of a property and the rainwater actually soaks then into the ground. We may be looking at a little bit more locally and managing surface water using, for example, geocellular crates. We may be looking to manage that water in a kind of a linear process next to the highway. We may be looking at large parks. What's quite interesting about the park on the left here, and it's in the United States, where they have a lot more space than us. They knocked down the houses to create the park. And at first they knocked down 4 houses, I think it was, because obviously they do have a bit more space in terms of garden, but, to create that park. And it was a simple detention basin, and then they went a step further and created it into a real local community park to store the surface water. But as Martin mentioned, we're not just about some of those more sustainable urban drainage systems or the green infrastructure type approaches. The guide also recognises the importance of managing exceedance, and so other, maybe more harder measures, or making best use of available space. So a car park doubling up as a shallow depth storage pond. And of course local resistance measures as well. And I think what really strikes me is there's always a fear that we can't do this in dense urban areas. Yet there are many, many examples from around the world where they have actually managed to achieve just that. Whether it be within quite built-up urban areas, for example in the top two images, to manage flows from the roofs on the left and the streets on the right, or managing flows from roofs in the two bottom images, in a narrow planter next to a house or in a rain garden. And in certain communities, they actually really look to promote, and quite proud that they've actually done this as well. So what benefits can we expect to see? Now, particularly if we're going to use SUDs, yes, we can limit the flows entering our drainage systems so we can maximise the capacity of our drainage systems. We can manage more flows above ground. We can use it more as a resource. We can even use it as an amenity value. We can look to improve the water quality and the resilience of properties, as well as increase the extent and viability of the green infrastructure itself. And that will really come back in a few slides on some of the urban design aspects of that I think we really need to be thinking about. I think what's quite interesting though is we can use traditional approaches just to achieve still quite a few benefits, as highlighted maybe by the black text here. But then moving to different shades of green to demonstrate maybe how much more benefits we can actually see. And I apologise if anyone's colourblind to pick that up. But clearly, if we can mimic our natural drainage processes, we can really start to make a substantial difference and improve water quality and pollution. But that also gives us obviously improved in terms of water resource. But I think what's really absolutely key is we can start to enhance our urban areas and the biodiversity. The example on the top right, I think it is one of the green roofs retrofitted in Manchester. In the middle, we have the, I'd almost call it famous now, Islington Rain Garden, which has been very well known. But also an example of what's been working very, very well for many years, which is inlet controls on gullies to actually manage water. So I'll briefly now just kind of talk about and explain the guidance. And really the aim of the guidance here is to support practitioners to be able to retrofit surface water management measures. We've tried to keep the guidance in terms of the style of writing quite fresh and easy to read, and try to make get as many examples in as we can, and also just some simple steps that we actually need to take. And within the guidance, there's two fundamental approaches: strategic retrofitting and opportunistic retrofitting. Strategic retrofitting, we look at, we've got some very clear drivers, and we're looking to resolve a problem. And that might be over quite a size area. And so we go off and we plan what we can do and where. Opportunistic retrofitting is really about taking that chance, seizing that moment when you can retrofit and do something differently. And that may not be because you're trying to manage water quality or reduce flood risk at the time. It might be because you're just enhancing the urban area. But what's really, really critical is we try and join up any opportunistic approaches and get them into a strategic approach. So it's not just some ad hoc opportunistic retrofitting going off all over the shop, but we understand how that might fit into a bigger picture. It's very important that we see that every space is an opportunity for us, particularly because within the day-to-day planning process, we do have these opportunities to make changes. And so we very much need to think about enhancing and greening any available space that we can, when it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you need to look at actually, are you going to have a soft or hard landscape? But what we're going to have to do, we have to form far more partnerships. And actually, both strategically with maybe kind of key stakeholders, but dipping down in with a very local stakeholders. But for some opportunities, there may not be the clear individual business case for each scheme. But if we understand how it all links together, and strategically how it might actually start to feed in and support other initiatives, maybe we can start to see some dual funding. So the guidance is underpinned by the framework. The framework follows some very logical delivery steps in terms of preparing feasibility, developing options, appraising cost and benefit, implementation, and then performance monitoring. And central to that then is urban design and the principles of urban design, of which we've looked to have 7 key principles that the guidance and people's thought processes maybe actually sort of think about. I'll just quickly run through them. So the first one is what kind of context and what kind of scale of retrofit. We could be going from very extreme, from a conservation area to an area where we've got regeneration. So you've got quite a diverse context that you may be looking to retrofit. And who are you going to retrofit for, and what is the actual scale of that retrofit itself? We then advocate, think about designing for people first. Is it safe for them? Where can we actually introduce measures that allows people to be able to move freely? Recognising that no space is useless. So every space has a purpose. But if we're not very clear on the purpose, maybe that area can become unloved and fall into disrepair. So it's making sure that we're very clear on the function, and can we actually enhance that as well. And then it's about creating diversity at the place. So it's not just about one, it's about one purpose. And you may use very kind of different shades and textures and mixtures to actually achieve that different feel. What's very critical is we improve connections and cohesion between places. Whatever that scale is, whether it's on a street scale or a neighbourhood scale, that we start to actually join things up. And we connect and integrate resource flows. And when we talk about that, we mean about the different types of infrastructure. So blue infrastructure, green infrastructure, red infrastructure in terms of utilities. Because what's absolutely critical is that although good places should never be finished, we need to accommodate change. Because what we do not want to do is to retrofit something to only then find that it has to be dug back up because there's some other utility that actually needs to go through that. The guidance then moves through in terms of preparation. So looking at what is critical to success in terms of partnership and engagement, both linking the disciplines. This isn't just one type of discipline. This is going to be very wide-ranging, and the type of professions that we actually need to make this a real success. And it's about sharing resources. But I think quite critically, it's not necessarily one leader. And you may find the leadership can actually change and evolve during a project. Feasibility is about thinking about the longer term as well as the immediate needs, and recognising that we're going to need things to actually fit within the planning process. I think what's absolutely fundamental, and we have no shame of this, in terms of making sure we establish what the need is. It's often very easy to maybe ignore what the need is, or we don't quite investigate it enough. So for example, this is up in Bradford where you had overland flow, which was kind of coming from parkland. It caused major kind of flooding in the highway, and then it actually came out through people's houses. And then I think we later found out that there was a buried watercourse underneath all this. But if you understand the need, you can start to actually look at coming up with the right solutions. So there's various solutions that were used in Bradford. One was using some geocellular. But if you really, and I mean truly understand the need, we can then start to look at what are our opportunities. Our opportunities might be what we call target opportunities, ones which we can maybe start to really go and focus and do kind of quite quickly. They may be quite common, so you might be looking across similar types of urban landscape. Or they may be future opportunities, opportunities which are coming up through regeneration or planning, and you can end up then with measures that both manage water quantity and water quality, as well as creating a far more pleasant vista. From the feasibility, we're then able to go and actually identify retrofit strategies, so in terms of what we're going to go and do. The guidance then looks at actually developing options, in terms of coming up with what we can do and where. Obviously quite critical is that we size it, we plan it out, but also go and understand the performance. The performance of the different measures. This is an example from Lamb Drove, where there's suds in there, and you can see the marked difference between the control site and the substantial flow reduction that we're seeing at Lamb Drove. The guidance looks at and provides advice in terms of appraisal. It's moving away from some of our standard approaches, which may be very much looking at very simplistic ways and for whole life cost and very simplistic ways for benefits, but to consider a far wider range of benefits, both societal and environmental. And that's quite a big step for us, particularly if we want to start to try and actually monetize them. And the guidance points to, and it's not looking to replicate, it points to actually where you can go for, to actually help undertake different assessments, so we can actually monetize those societal and environmental benefits. But what I would say is that whole arena is very fast changing, and we expect to see a lot more development, probably a lot more toolkits. There are one or two out there to really help us quantify those benefits more fully in the future. And this is just a very nice example at Halewood Primary School, where using one of the online calculators, which is Green Infrastructure from North West, it actually came up with a net present value of £80,000 over 25 years. And there's more information on this example in the guidance. The guidance then moves around in terms of implementation. So there's key practical issues where we get to the nitty-gritty of detailed design, ownership, funding, incentivisation, health and safety, construction and maintenance. But again, it's not looking to repeat what you will find in other guides. So don't go into this guidance thinking you'll see a repeat of C697, the SUDS manual. And then the guidance concludes with performance monitoring. So identifying what we should monitor, when and how. And it's thinking certainly in terms of, say, water quality monitoring and the benefits that we start to see, which having the evidence base could be quite important as we move forward. But we also may be needing to monitor different people's opinions and views to understand how they've potentially changed during the whole retrofitting process. And so part of this monitoring focus is about sharing knowledge as well. So just to kind of wrap up, the guidance is really about trying to make the most of the opportunities that we have. And if I could leave you just with some key thoughts, no space is useless. There are many areas in which we can probably enhance and actually change and create multiple value. Partnership working is going to be absolutely critical, not only across stakeholders, but getting down to that individual level eventually. We will see a mix and match of measures. It's not one size fits all, it's not one type fits all. And we will have to be linking our disciplines together to bring in the expertise that we really need for this. We really need to be creating those multifunctional and multi-value land uses, which in turn actually helps create far more multiple benefits, and in time of austerity is obviously very important. So I think in conclusion, I'd say we can do it better, we can retrofit. We have a lot that we need to do in this country, but we believe that that this really can be achieved, and certainly we hope the guidance will actually start to help people to actually get there. Thank you.